Faza'il A'maal, More Trouble Than It's Worth, Part 2, Literature Review. Now, in this second part, I will discuss the literature review found in Dr. Turkistany's thesis. This is going to be about a dozen books that are of an academic nature that the author reviewed, looked at, and critiqued. I myself, in my other series, The Divided House of Tablighi Jama, and in the Curate Zeg of Ashraf Ali Thanvi, have looked at some of these books. I only give them here in screenshot form so you can look at the books yourself and make your own judgment. The first book mentioned by Dr. Turkistany is تحقيق المقال في تخريج أحاديث فضائل الأعمال by Latif Abdurrahman Al-Bahrajji, Bahrajji, or however it's pronounced. So it basically is a book that's pro-Tabligh, pro-TJ, and he said that his answer is, the reason he wrote this book was to answer the bias of hatred against the book of the TJ. So straightforward, but no mention whatsoever of the analysis of the hadith found within the book. The second book that he mentions, well, actually, before we get to the second book, in the footnote of this book of Bahrajji, he states that the bibliography for the book of Tablighi Nisab, it wasn't critically analysed. So the original bibliography was done by a guy called Munshi Anis Ahmed, who was one of the publishers of Tablighi Nisab, who must have done many thousands of copies and profited very greatly from it. It was added to with an introduction, and a person called Muhammad Shahid Saharanpuri quoted from Al-Munshi, and he gives the quote of where he did this, and then he reprinted it many times without modification or corrections to the mistakes found in the bibliography. So there's an important point in this footnote here. The TJ are not interested in accuracy, critical thought, and correcting mistakes and errors. They just pump out thousands and thousands of copies of this book that has terrible statements in it, really. Statements that are antithetical to Islam, 56% fabricated and weak, and they don't care about the mistakes. And the author says, the doctor who wrote the thesis says that, well, we're going to look at these issues and we will analyse them for you. The second book that he mentioned is a book called, the title of which is called Tablighi Nisab Ek Mutala'a by Tabish Mahdi. It has ND, NP, no date and no publisher. This is an Urdu book and it's a critique of the TJ. Again, it has an academic standard, so he's quoting anti-TJ sources here. The fourth book that he mentions is a book that I reviewed in my House Divided series, which was a doctoral thesis submitted to Royal Holloway University, and it was the study of the Jama Tabligh between the 1920s up until the year 2000 by an author called Yoginda Sikand. And he generally was positive about the TJ, but again, his voluminous study did not have any analysis whatsoever of the hadith found in the FA. I will call Faza'il A'maal FA because I'm going to be saying it a lot. The Tablighi Jamaat will be the TJ, and they'll also be interchangeably called the Deobandis. Next we have this book, which is again another very academic study. It's written by a very famous Deobandi called Muhammad Khalid Masood. It's published in 2002, and it's called Travelers in Faith, Studies of the Tablighi Jamaat as a Transnational Islamic Movement for Faith Revival. And it's published in Leiden, which is in the Netherlands. Again, no analysis or critical statistical analysis whatsoever of the hadith found inside the FA. FA is Faza'il A'maal, Faza'il A'maal. Then we have this book, which is called Jamaat Tabligh fil Qarat al-Hindiyya by Sayyid Talib al-Rahman, 1999. And again, this is a critique of the book, and it does talk about the weak and fabricated ahadith, and includes a critical study of the 6 principles of the Jama'ah. I myself did a critique of this in my series A House Divided. Refer to that if you want further details. 7, we have this book, which is Sheikh Safi Ar-Rahman Dahlawi, another critical study of Jamaat Tabligh, نظرة آبرة اعتبارية في الجماعة التبليغية. Again, the title of it, Dar al-Hadith, and the location Saudi Arabia, suggests it will be antithetical to the TJ, notwithstanding no analysis of the hadiths within the book are studied. So this should be quite clear to you now. To date, nothing has been done to critically analyze these hadith, and this is why this book is so important and why this series is so important. And as we go along, hopefully you'll learn a lot about how you critique hadith. So the next book is this book by a man called Sheikh Hamoud bin Abdullah Al-Tuwaijiri, 1993, and this is present all over the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Many bookshops have this book, and again it's another critical study of the book. Many critical studies, a few positive ones like the one of Khalid Masood, and a few more positive ones coming up as well. The next book we have is this one here, which is called Al-Jamaat Al-Islamiyya fi Daw Al-Kitabi wa Sunnah by Salim Eid Al-Hilali. This doesn't have any date, but again it talks more about the beliefs of the TJ, the fallacious antithetical beliefs and heterodoxical beliefs, but no mention of the hadith, despite this person, Salim Al-Hilali, being someone who is known for critiquing hadith. Then we have a positive, well, not a positive, but an unaligned book written by a man called Nizar Ibrahim Al-Jarbu, 1991, and it basically talks about the methodology of Jamaat Tabligh, Waqafat ma'a Jamaat Tabligh. And the final book is a book by, it's published in Idara Nashriyat Islam in Lahore, Pakistan. It doesn't have any date. Sheikh Muhammad Mandur Nu'mani, and this is a book that's positive for the Jamaat Tabligh. It contains the words of the founder of the TJ, Sheikh Muhammad Ilyas, and it has 11 chapters. So this is very dry, and it's just simply repeating chapters and books and titles, but this author went into great detail to analyze exactly what was said about the TJ from themselves and from their opponents. So the work you have in front of you is a very important work in the sense that it will give you, for the first time, a critical analysis of the ahadith and the sunnah found within this book. So now, to give you enough with the TJ and the FA, now I'll give you this quote, which is found from Muhammad Mustafa Al-A'zami's book, which is his Ph.D. thesis, which was submitted to the University of Cambridge and was published many times. And for a lot of times, from the 70s, 80s, 90s, it was the only really authoritative work on hadith that an educated person could look at. And in addition to this work, and one of the reasons why this work is important is that the supervisor for it was a very famous Orientalist called A.J. Arbery, who was a specialist in Persian and Arabic, and he actually did a translation of the Quran himself, but he praised it highly in the introduction. He said it was a very important work. And another book that Azami did was a book called On Shat's Origins of Mohammedan Jurisprudence. Joseph Shat is another very important figure when it comes to the Western study of hadith. He was very, very influential, and that's another work of Azami's, but in my reading of that book is very dry, and because it talks specifically about the legalistic ahadith corpus, it would be very dry reading. Another book that Azami wrote was Sahih al-Bukhari, the author's biography, recensions and manuscripts, and Azami has also done books on the Quran and a few other topics as well. I wouldn't like to quote which ones, but he is very, very well known in the English-speaking world for the study of hadith and Quran. Anyway, this is what he says in his PhD thesis, and it talks about something that many people may not actually know about, but it's called the art of writing in pre-Islamic Arabia. It is said that at the time of the advent of Islam, there were only 17 persons in Mecca who knew how to write. This statement sounds strange in view of the fact that Mecca was a cosmopolitan city, a barter market, and a junction of caravan routes. The figure limiting the learned persons to 17 appears therefore to be an underestimate. And then he goes on to prove how this is probably an underestimate. He states that in pre-Islamic Arabia, there were schools, for example, in Mecca, in Ta'if, Anbar, Hira, Dumat al-Jandal, Medina, and in the tribe of Hudayl were boys and girls who learned together the skills of reading and writing. And he gives all the quotes at the bottom: Baladuri's Futuh, Ibn Qutayba, Ibn Sa'ad, and Ibn Abd al-Rabih. So this is again a very useful book, and it will maybe change your opinion about what exactly was happening in pre-Islamic Arabia. And this is why this book is useful, and I give you this snippet with the hopes that you would seek to read the full book and come to your own academic critical conclusion. Stay tuned for many more parts.
Hence, we shouldn't read it, burn it, get rid of it.